Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a lead fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Cicchetti. I love it. Every week I get to interview a green building professional somewhere in the world. And today, Nitin Govila is with us from Singapore, and he's the Senior Vice President of Asia-Pacific with Serge Ferrari. Nitin, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Charlie, and thank you for having me here. We are on two parts of the world now, but it's great to be connected with you.
Yeah, the technology is amazing. I know it's late evening where you are, early morning for me, but that's just the beauty here as we get
Absolutely.
To connect. And that is one of the advantages, of course, of technology. Well, I know you do a lot of things, and I can't wait to talk about your journey. But just take us back, though. Kind of give us a foundation. Where'd you grow up and go to school?
Yeah, so my early life was in India. So I did my schooling. I did my bachelor's in engineering in India, then did a master's in management also in India, and different parts of India. So my early part of life was in the western part of India near Mumbai. Then the bigger part, till my class 12 was in Delhi. Then moved further north for my engineering, came back to close to Delhi for my management. And then started my career in paints with a Japanese company, Kansai Paints. That was in the western and the central part of India. And before leaving India, I worked for India's largest dairy and food company. And that was also in the kind of the western part of India, but with a national role. So those were 7 years of my working. At that point of time, I'm talking about early 2000s, where there were a lot of changes happening across the world, a lot of significant changes, geopolitical, but also on the business and the economy side. That made me think that I need to do something. I mean, a lot of things in the understanding of business has changed. I felt the need to do an international MBA. Having explored various choices, also as an Indian, it was a big decision to take, to leave the company, to leave your job and go for a full-time MBA. So I pursued an MBA with a very good institute in Paris called HEC Paris, among the top ranked MBA universities across the world. Big change. I had never stepped out of India until December 2003, not even for a holiday. So you can imagine, and that too going to France. I mean, not even say an Anglo-Saxon country in that sense, US or UK. So it was a big change, big change in my life, in my perspective. I was married and I had a young daughter, just 10 months old. So it was I would say a big change, but a risk I wish to take. And maybe we'll cover that. But one of the things I've always used my life when taking decisions is not only the mind element, but I always also I meditate. I'm a meditation trainer also. And I always go deep into my heart or dive into my heart when decisions like these have to be taken. So whenever there's a balance between heart and mind and the heart feels comfortable, I really feel that's the way to go. Even though the mind in its material concept may look at good and bad, white and gray and everything. So it was an amazing journey. Came to France, did my MBA there, did a very good international project, which came because of my experience in India, which I never thought that will, be helpful or not, because you were in a different country. Got a project which I covered nearly many countries of the world. So imagine that I had not yet traveled. And when I came to France in that project, I nearly covered 10 or 12 countries in a span of 6 months to do that project. So on the axis, it was really a 180-degree kind of change.
Yeah, how you grew up there. It's because I was going to say, it's kind of ironic, right? You hadn't left India until that time. And then you, with the companies you've been with, have helped with their geographic expansion. And you've really been traveling and helping to do business in a lot of different regions. The mind heart. Well, as I was looking over your bio and I saw some of your content, so we definitely need to talk about that more. But to our podcast listeners, I'm a big fan of that too. If you ask someone what do they think about something, it literally is their brain thinking. Whereas if you ask someone, stick with your gut's really your heart, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think we definitely got to hit more on that. So still tell us about the career and how you were putting that together. Did you know you eventually wanted to get into, the business side and expansion? Was it buildings? Was it, what were some options at the time for you as you were continuing your career?
Yeah. So as I did that project, that was in a very big international company, again, a €1 billion company in home automation, a French company in a home automation. So when I worked for them for that project for 6 months, they liked my work. So then they hired me full time. So I worked with them for a couple of years in their international marketing department, handling or looking after channeling, means understanding distribution channel across the world. I was also involved and I worked as like a direct executive partner to the number 2 person who also played a very key role in terms of, I would say, as a mentor, as a guide, and I learned a lot from him. So he took me under his wings as an executive partner. So I worked with him when we were doing annual budgeting, working with different business areas across the world. And that directly put me in the, I would say, to understand how businesses are run, decisions are taken, how you look at different perspectives. And under that, I also handled an independent project nearly covering 10 to 15 countries of the world to look at international sales practices and everything. That was a 1.5-year project, which I was the project manager directly handling. So that set the ball rolling, actually, because that those 2-3 years, I was in France for nearly 4 years, working for this company, doing international projects and everything. That really set the ball rolling, and it exposed me to different cultures, a different way of working, looking at how business decisions are taken in international companies. And that helped me. And then the time came where I felt it's the time to come back to Asia. It was again 2007 or 8, and then found an opportunity to move to Singapore again. So it started with building and home automation and kind of then remained in that. So I was in the roofing sector, again, handling an Asia-Pacific role in that sense for a French company. So my association with French started from 2003 December. And it still continues in that sense. And so I worked for 7 years with roofing, then moved to another building material, which is in composite material, again, construction material. And the fact that in these companies, they were mid-sized companies, actually, they were planning to expand. And that was also the reason with my exposure and understanding of different cultures, having a good mix of Europe and Asia, it helped me to really settle down well, to be open to understanding how different businesses work in countries. And when we set up a lot of subsidiaries, whether in China, India, Indonesia, from scratch, Thailand, Philippines, or even Japan. And, how to look at how to start a business in terms of when you're starting with a single person, just understanding the market to then, do multiple million euros of business in 5-6 years time, how to scale up. Initially you start as a startup in a way to some extent, and then you scale up, and the scalability to maintain that really, I would say, kind of helped me a lot. And that's been the driving factor behind my success also, I would say.
I love it. And so sustainability and energy savings, and you mentioned automation and eco-friendly materials. So as you were going through the 2000s there, building up your career, and even after 2008, here in the U.S., obviously a recession, and I know that had global impact too. What was the sustainability at that time, Nitin? Was it energy savings only? Was it we do need better materials? If you fast forward to today, it's a lot when you talk about sustainability. But early on, was it energy savings or better materials? What was going on in these regions? Sustainability.
Yeah, very good question, actually. When I look back, when I was with Somfy, or this French company in home automation, that time really it was catching on. The company was a pioneer in developing some systems, which we call, in today's world, a lot of nice words have been given, what we call as passive strategies to manage sustainability. And when you look at passive strategies with a mix of active strategies, so what would be a passive approach? Could be sunlight, shading, and daylighting, managing that sunlighting and daylighting, managing natural ventilation, managing louvers and dynamic facades. So those were things which were being developed. And being a home automation company, that really exposed that, because in Europe, and I think in these things, possibly I may be wrong, please do correct me, but I do feel I've seen that Europe has been normally taking the lead in all these elements, creating the building norms, creating these important elements in each city or country to look at, to propose subsidies for people to go for these passive approaches. So these were the buzzwords which were starting in terms of sunlight shading and daylighting, which was a very key word. Mechanical ventilation was catching up there with the automated roller systems, roller shutters, and to manage the lighting, whether it's the northern part of Europe or the southern part of Europe, where the the element of sun changes, how to use that and to then manage the air conditioning load. So it was already starting that, and it kind of, helped me to understand better and, be more sensitive to that. Obviously, when I moved to roofing, it was a different element, but then in roofing also, there was this element of we were using recycled paper, which was being processed, and that was giving a lightweight roofing. So in countries where there were earthquakes, in countries where there were, waterproofing is a problem, this kind of roofing material became a very good solution with easy installation, reduce the cost of the structure of the building, and still have a long-term advantage, whether it's a typhoon place, whether it's earthquake, whether it's a rain place. So when roofs kind of, collapse in big storms and big calamities, there was no damage of life. At the same time, you could also save on the structural costs. So that way it continued. Now, when I'm in Serge Ferrari for the last 6 years, it's a different ballgame altogether. We call it the tensile membranes or the fabrics as the fifth element. A lot of big structures, instead of using a lot of concrete for roofing and other things, you could do it with membranes. So not only you manage the lighting, you manage the acoustics element, you manage the transparency part, and there's a lot of exterior products, a lot of interior products, which you're able to manage that. So it continues. Obviously, the industry has also evolved. If you ask me, as I said, it starts with passive approaches, went to active approaches. Now there's a buzzword of smart energy management, which was starting when I was in 2007 and 8, home automation, but it was limited to few elements. Now, when you go to a building where sometimes we go, because I may still be using the motor system of the company I was working for 15 years back, combined with the blinds which my company is making. And then you see how buildings have changed, how new designs have come, how things are being regulated to manage all that. And I think the fourth element is still at a global level, at a much, I would say, institutional level, is the renewable energy. Whether it has been touched to people, you see that, I see that a lot in Middle East now, with the solar panels being pushed in malls, in homes, or people are giving opportunities to use that, to develop energy and electricity. It's not yet caught up too much in Asia, catching up. I mean, China is obviously taking the lead in that, in other countries also. So this is the evolution, I would say, in my last 15 years I have seen.
Thanks for showing us that. And you're right. Some things 15 years ago still hold true, and then some has really evolved. So as you look back, you mentioned a mentor earlier, but who else had some influence on you through your career? Anyone else you might call a mentor? Maybe open the door.
I would say when I was in India, when I was finishing my management, there was a professor in business communication, and she taught a course or one elective in one of the terms. She played a very key influence, and I developed a strong relationship in that sense, to speak with her whenever I wanted, to also, kind of bounce off things, share how things are going in my career, talk to her. Sometimes at that young age, you get attracted by certain things, whether a name or a brand or those kinds of things, but how to take career decisions, So she played a role. I'm still in touch with her. In fact, now my daughter is in touch with her for certain projects because she's an HR professor of a very big management institute in India. So it's been a generation, but I do keep in touch with her, and it's always nice to be connected. And then when I moved to France, I mentioned this person played a very key role in my getting a project while I was doing my MBA as a professional project, part of my curriculum. And in a way, he was the one who listened to my final presentation and recommendation. And actually, then he was the one who played a role that I should be hired in the company, and then took me under his wings as an executive partner. So he was there. Then when I joined another company, he was actually the CEO. So I reported to him directly in that sense as the Asia-Pacific head for 7 years. And now, obviously, last 6 years, we are in different organizations, but we keep in touch and always share. And it's never been only about business with him. It's always about geopolitical. We talk about cultures. We talk about so many things, and sometimes we come out with amazing business ideas through that sharing. Through that discussion. And I've always felt that, yeah.
Real wisdom. I love it. Well, thanks for sharing with us some of your mentors. How about as you look back, some of your proudest achievements? What comes to mind?
And that's a tricky one. I would say the first achievement, even though it may not be an achievement for people, but the fact that I took this step, which that time was supposed to be kind of a risk, where I said, okay, let me leave my job, and go for my MBA. That is something required courage. It was to a certain extent risk-taking also. But I think that changed my whole life, I would say, where I am today, what I'm doing, being exposed to so many countries of the world and cultures, and having a very different perspective of the world. I think that's would count as a big change. Obviously, in businesses, there have been many achievements, whether you look at setting up of legal entities, subsidiaries, which are part of my role, but those were not easy, in countries with different cultures. I would say China, India, Indonesia, Japan, very different, very diverse. The construction of the business is different. The distribution channel is different. People are different. Cultures are different. Legal issues are different. That would be one. I would say, I've been recently involved 2 years back during the peak of COVID in an acquisition in Taiwan. That was a key one. Again, a very unique challenge, and how the option was found, how the pre-work was done, and then working with our head office, R&D, and other departments to ensure that I was able to ensure that it successfully completed even in the peak of COVID. I would also want to add, I won't say it's an achievement, but the fact that I'm into meditation, became a meditation trainer just after I joined, and it's been 20 plus years. I'm able to, and I'm as a volunteer. I work, I'm connected to this organization, Heartfulness meditation organization, as a volunteer. So as a trainer, I conduct meditation sessions for many companies every week, a couple of hours, depending on different timings and options. So this, for me, I won't call it as an achievement, but it's very close to me. And I feel good about it, because we are able to share something which I feel has helped me and can help the society at large, more so in the last 2-3 years with the challenges people have faced mentally, physically, psychologically, and everything. It's not been easy.
You're right, especially during this pandemic, and just the world is tense. So am I hearing this right? You hadn't always meditated. This is something you really perfected a little later in life, or no, you always have, but now you're really volunteering, you're bringing it to others. So which one is it? Had you really
So it's actually both. I started at the age of 24. I mean, somewhere just around 1999, and became a trainer in 2000. So exposing different people, wherever I go I was doing that in India also. When I started traveling overseas and for work, there were people who were practicing the same meditation. So I had a chance to meet them in whichever country I used to travel to, and did open houses for people in China, Japan, Korea, across Southeast Asia. So it's been part of my life, wherever I could do so, wherever I could find time, and it's always been there with me. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it sounds like you enjoy bringing it to others. So to our listeners, can you give us a pro tip on that mind-heart connection? Anything you could share with us for someone that's really trying to work on this?
Well, it's not so complicated, I would say. The thing is, mind is always active. It will always be full of thoughts. I learned, in fact, I knew that it's a challenge, but somewhere I read each one of us has nearly 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day, which means one thought every 1.25 seconds. And we don't know that. So imagine with the mind, we are able to only focus on few things, but the subconscious level is observing and gathering and gaining and, going through many things. And it's also creating wisdom. Now, sometimes to hear to that voice of that wisdom, which comes from the subconscious, you need to bring the mind at rest. And the best way is, if you're able to connect your heart, you disconnect in that sense with the mind. And that's a process which then ensures you're able to bring the balance between heart and mind. Obviously, as human beings, mind will play a role. The key thing is our mind our master, or we are mastering the mind? And I think connecting with the heart is one step in that. If anybody does not even want to learn meditation, does not know, it's a very simple process. Just close your eyes, just gently bring your attention to your heart and stay connected there. The moment you do that, you itself will be a start of the process that you will be able to bring the element of heart into the picture to kind of balance both. And at the same time, if you're able to bring the mind at rest through that process, you will be able to hear this, as you just mentioned very rightly, gut or the inner voice or the wisdom which comes. Because there's so much clutter and noise in the mind. The voice is there, but we are not able to hear that voice under that so much noise and the clutter which is there. Now, if that calmness is there, you will be able to hear, because that sensation only comes through a feeling, not through a thinking, not through a language. And if the mind is at rest, you're able to do so. Meditation, which I do, I'm sure there are many practices and people follow that, so there's no comparison. What I do is a very simple one. Close my eyes. There's no chanting and everything. Gently bring attention to my heart. And just start with the thought that the source of light is there in the heart, and which is attracting and pulling me within. I just rest there. Through overall regular practice, whether you do for 15 minutes or 45 minutes, you will be able to, get into that process of meditation easily and very simply.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's on the podcast. I love to hear the pro tips, the good habits. So let's get back to kind of today and work.
Yes.
So your membranes, composite materials, what your company does. So can you tell us a little more about Serge Ferrari and some of your offerings and what's kind of keeping you busy today?
Yeah. So Serge Ferrari is, again, a mid-sized company, but a world leader in composite material. Composite material, when I mean, it's like tensile membranes. People have different words for that. Tensile membranes, somebody might say tensile fabrics. In the industry, we are the only company which is transversal, meaning we operate in multiple market segments. So when I say solar protection, it's related to interior and exterior blinds, awnings, even acoustics fabrics. Then when you look at big structures, then I'm talking about airports, stadiums, amphitheaters, which are covered with, the white fabrics or different color fabrics you may see. Then you have event tents, enclosed structures. You have facades where you can give different shapes and print on it. You have furniture fabrics, marine protection, the marine equipment like the yachts and other elements. Then for biogas, where because of the strong ammonia gas you create, you can ensure that the output is good and the fabric does not degenerate. Then water storage and multiple applications, even for military and other applications. And the unique part is that each segment, as I mentioned, we will have a very unique or a group of unique competitors, because we are the only one which are transversal, but different companies operate in only one specific market segment or product segment. And the distribution channel, the way to sell or the product is very different. It has different features, different applications. So when we talk about solar shading, then the fabrics which are used for blinds, whether inside and exterior, becomes a very key role to play. When you talk about facades, if you're able to block 85% of the heat outside the glass, imagine the effect you can create in terms of energy saving within the building. Because what people don't realize, once the heat comes inside, you may have the best of blinds, but the heat is already inside the building. So the best way to manage shading, manage lighting, manage heat, manage even glare is to have something which you can put outside your home, outside the glass facades and everything. When you look at construction material, I say big stadiums, airports, with the translucency effect, with the other elements, you're able to bring a light, a very comfortable light. Still, you feel you're in an outside environment, not in an enclosed one, whether you're watching football or soccer or any other sport, or even for that matter, baseball in US. I mean, in those kinds of stadiums, you will feel a very different look and element on that. And we also have, because some of the material is polyester PVC based, we've also had and have developed technologies where you can recycle this PVC into creating the usable material or yarns which are of good quality, which can then be reused. So this is a very key element where the company is focusing on. We are creating modular systems and structures which you can attach to any manufacturing entity. So it's not only for our fabrics, it could be for any PVC or plastic. And the elements which you create as output are of good quality, which then you can reuse. Because the industry has suffered always. There are sometimes recycling, but the recycling which comes out, it's so bad quality that in the end, if you have to end up throwing it, then there's no value add in that. So if you can find a way where you can recycle things and reuse them and, continue that whole cycle of things, that also helps. So that's what the company is also focusing on. And that's a key element of our messaging and our future innovation and R&D. We spend nearly 4 to 5% of our turnover on R&D. It's a very big team, and continuously we're looking at, we have fabrics which are PVC free. We have water-based fabrics. So all those elements are the future technologies where the company is working on, because we know how times are changing and what will be the expectations in the future.
Thank you for showing us more about what your company does in all these regions, the materials. So to all our listeners, make sure you connect, of course, with Nitin and Serge Ferrari. Check out the company here. But that's a good segue to my next question, which is what's next? So what are you excited about? What are you reading up on? Like, what's coming at us in this green building, sustainable materials movement? What's next?
Well, I've been trying to listen to different, podcasts and different technologies which have been coming on. I talked about an interesting concept which we are working on, and I would encourage people to go there, called Polyloop. It's a very interesting concept, a very modular concept, very unique in its industry, with not such a big capital investment required. It's really it would be interesting to look at. I attend sometimes expos where green building is becoming a very common thing. I was a few weeks back in Saudi Arabia, in Singapore. Everybody has defined a vision for their countries in terms of how they want to become carbon neutral, for example, and how they are doing it, what they are, proposing or helping companies or their local people to push. That's something. On the book part, I would say one of the very interesting books I read, which actually can be used in any context, was a book by a Singapore professor, which said the name was Be Smarter Than Your Problem, the art of systems thinking. Very simple book, very interesting. Created, how sometimes, even when you're working on concepts in sustainability or recycling, you need to change the way to look at things, need to be courageous enough to question things, to question also the processes which you have, because sometimes we are so ingrained as companies in our own processes. Related to that, a very interesting book I'm currently reading is on open strategy. I mean, it's challenging all the concepts different organizations have related to how strategy should be defined or run or executed, who should be part of it, who should not be part of it. And that's a real eye-opener. And when you look at case studies in those books which talk about all kinds of companies, whether in the sustainability, whether in the tech or in any other kind of sectors, how they've approached that and what changes they brought through this approach was amazing. So these are the areas I try to keep myself busy. Obviously, talking about it, I kind of participate, and when there are a lot of facade expositions, or I would say facade events, I represent my company and talk 20 minutes about what is changing in bioclimatics facades, how things can change, how you can bring about energy conservation and sustainability, and support the city or the country's drive towards zero emissions or whatever carbon neutral strategies each company has. So I do that. This year it's starting again, and I think in fact today itself one of my colleagues have presented in a Dubai facade event in Dubai. This Friday it's in India, and then thereafter in the second part of the year we have a couple of them in Southeast Asia and Japan and Australia.
It's amazing. I agree with all that. I mean, the future's bright. We still have work to do. And Thanks for sharing where you kind of do your research and what you're excited about. Let's ask a few more questions here about you. What are some good habits or routines you may have?
Okay. I think the first thing, as I said, I meditate. I meditate every day. I try to meditate at least minimum 30 minutes, and it can go up to 45, 50 minutes. I do that. My logic of meditation, as I've always been asked also that, okay, how do you take out time to do that? I always answer it saying that the fact that I do that, I always feel I have more time during the day than when I don't meditate. So that's the connection or the invetendo I've seen. I meditate. No other specific rituals, but I also, when making some key decisions or doing certain things, I try to listen to my heart. Very key element is also when taking decisions is to know where your personal compass is, because you cannot, I personally feel and believe, you cannot just change your personal compass according to a situation, because then really it's not the right one, and you may not end up being in a person who can, I won't say word authentic, but a person who's real, who's to the ground, or who understands, because people will never be able to know what kind of person you are. And and that's about it. And rest, obviously, because I travel a lot, but whenever I have time, I would prefer to go for a walk, just walk in the nature, take time to walk, discover a city. And that's my way of learning about culture, because it's not only when you visit local offices do you learn. I really learn about culture, walking in the city, in the streets, going to a restaurant, maybe going to a supermarket. That's where you really learn about the local culture also. So this for me is very critical whenever I'm traveling.
I love that. Just slowing down and observing. And I think I heard a lot in there, a lot of good wisdom. Thanks for sharing with us what helps you. So how about this next one? What's your specialty or gift?
Okay. Yeah, it's a tough one. And I may sound kind of repetitive, but I think these 15 years, I can say very confidently my capability to work across different cultures, to be adaptable, but at least, but still, be able to do what is expected of me, to be able to, create businesses or create a network with individuals in different countries, find a way to work. It's not alien. I actually enjoy. I mean, you send me to a new country, I will love to be there. I never feel a kind of fear or a shock or something. I mean, everything is new. I'm very curious about things, and that's my key, I would say, speciality also. I don't hesitate to ask questions. It could be foolish questions sometimes, but whenever I travel, whoever I meet, whether my team, whether anybody, anywhere I meet, for example, or if I know, I'll always ask questions. I'll always ask, why this is there, why is that is there in this country, why do they do like that, and all those things, because that's keeps on engaging me and lets me understand better on that sense. So I would say these are two elements which I now feel comes naturally to me.
Thank you for sharing. As we get to know each other better, I'm a fan of a bucket list. So is there any adventure or travel, or do you want to write a book? What are one or two things on your bucket list?
Well, I think for me, the only thing is I'm a great fan of photography. I've always tried to do that. So, but I won't say I'm a professional. I won't say I'm an expert, but if ever anything I have to do, I would prefer to take out maybe 6 months or a year, go across the world, do landscape, do nature photography, also there's beautiful cities in Europe, South America, or US, or even for that matter in Japan, and just do that. If there was anything, that's something I would definitely want to do.
That's fascinating. Do you get to come to the US some or not as much?
Not as much. It used to be earlier a lot more. I think my last visit, I suppose, was 2015 or 16. I have not been able to come. Hopefully this year, we are hoping my daughter should start university education in the US in August. So that may help us to travel there and there. I love the country. I mean, it's so huge. I've just been to few parts of it. But whenever I feel I get a chance, I would love to, grab it and come.
Well, it's exciting times for your daughter there, and there is a lot to offer here. It is a big country, but so much terrain, so different, state by state.
Yeah,
so
absolutely,
different.
absolutely.
Let's talk about books. You mentioned some of your readings earlier, but is there a book you'd recommend to our podcast listeners?
That's a difficult one because
it doesn't even have to be about buildings. Just something you'd recommend. If not a book, maybe a podcast, a documentary, just anything maybe that comes to mind.
I would say this book, which I'm reading on open strategy, it's actually written by a group of consultants based out of Europe, and they've shared their experiences and everything. Very interesting book. It's not like a theoretical kind of book. It's through practical examples. I'm still in the process of midway through it, but that's an interesting one. That's really an interesting one. I'm not saying as a business professional, but the elements they cover and the processes they talk, I suppose those could be universal ones, not coming from, say, big companies where, okay, this is a process you can only use while developing strategy in this kind of sector. I would say it can be used in any point of life or any kind of decision making you have to do or thinking you have to do. That's where it attracted to me, because there are obviously, as you know, many books on strategy. I mean, you pick up the word strategy and type, I don't know, millions of things will come up in terms of books or papers. But this really has kept me connected and, interested as I'm still reading.
Thank you for sharing. We'll put a link to anything we can in our podcast show notes and share some of these resources. Love it. I love our conversation here today. Two more questions. One is, think about your career. Is there anything you wish you'd have known earlier in your career? Any career advice there?
What can I say? Had I known earlier, right? Possibly, I think the element that what you need to do when you take your initial career decisions, I would say I've been a little bit lucky on that side, but there have bin moments where I felt, whether I was wrong or I should have, not gone for this or that. I suppose if there's somebody, when you're making your career choices initially, what you should look at, whether it's between a size or a brand or money vis-a-vis learning. I think that's something I carry it very strongly with me. And whoever I speak to, if there are youngsters or I get a chance to people who are also starting their careers or making choices, even where to study, what to study, and then going into the professional field of working, this is something I feel, had I known earlier, maybe some choices I would have made it differently, I would say. And so this is something I definitely tell people to do that. And I think the second thing I always say is, you need to be honest to yourself. You need to know your own self and never take decisions to be impressionable in a way that, okay, you're trying to impress people or trying to influence people with the social media. Okay, I can post somewhere, I'm there or whatever. But I think more important is your own self and your own happiness, which you will only know, and it comes from your own inside, not through an external thing. I think that is something I would also, recommend or suggest. Yeah.
That's solid advice. Thank you. Last question as we come to a close. Let's say someone's listening to this podcast and they're just now jumping in to this green building movement, the smart building movement, just everything we've talked about. Any words of encouragement for them?
Well, I would say very important is to believe in that, because there's one element. There are a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of individuals doing great work. Sometimes you see also something is more marketing and publicity. So I think if you're jumping on it, you need to first believe that you really believe in that. It cannot be superficial, because only when you believe in that, then wherever you are, everybody does not have to be a CEO to bring that change. Any employee, any individual, whether working or not working or doing something, can bring about that perspective or that change in their immediate environment and in a further environment, and those ripples then carry over the effect in a broader circle. So I think believing it in is very important, because it cannot come through force. It cannot come as a superficial thing. You have to really believe in it. And the second thing I would say, be ready to ask difficult questions for that, because this is something where if a change has to be made, one has to be ready to ask difficult questions, or on the other side, ready to face difficult questions, because it's not an easy journey sometimes, and sometimes some strong steps have to be also taken. But if you believe it, then I'm sure the path will slowly clear for you also.
Great words of encouragement. So to all of our podcast listeners, please connect with Nitin here, and thank you for coming to us from Singapore. Congratulations on all your successes, and especially taking that leap to go get that MBA and get out of India. Now look at what you've done there. It's just fascinating. So I'd love to stay in touch, and just want to say thank you for being on our podcast today.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for having me there. And it was a great conversation. And thank you for very insightful questions, because sometimes you're not expecting that, and then you suddenly have to really go back and think. And I hope my answers did make sense. And thank you again for having me.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked, and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.